The twin suns of planet Zaranth blazed high in the violet sky as the royal arena filled with roaring crowds. It was the day of challenge, when warriors from all over the galaxy came to prove their strength to the most feared alien princess, Valaria of the Flameblood clan. She stood tall on the sacred platform, armored in red crystal and gold. Her skin was a soft silver glow, and her long dark hair moved with the wind like smoke. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd. Her voice rang out across the arena. Let all who claim strength face the sacred arrow. From her back she pulled a long black arrow forged in the heart of a fallen star. It was not just a weapon, it was a royal challenge. The tradition was old. Any warrior who caught the arrow mid-air would win the right to marry the princess. But no one had ever done it, not even close. Let them try, she whispered coldly. Let them fail. She pulled back the string on her bow. The tension in the crowd grew thick. Then, whoosh, she fired the arrow into the sky. It flew fast, spinning like fire, glowing brighter and louder as it shot upward and curved down toward the ground far ahead. Warriors jumped and reached for it, but none even touched it. Until someone moved. A figure stepped calmly forward from the back. Not an alien, not a beast, a human. He was dressed in plain gray armor, worn and scratched. His hair was dark, his face calm and unreadable. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply raised his hand. And in one clean, perfect motion, he caught the arrow in the air. The entire arena went silent. Even the wind stopped. Valaria's mouth opened slightly. She blinked. Once, twice. She had trained her whole life in war. She had fought in star battles and burned enemies to ash. But nothing had prepared her for this. A human catching her sacred arrow? No, she whispered. The human looked up at her. His eyes weren't proud or mocking, just quiet, strong. He bowed, holding the arrow carefully, and then dropped it at his feet. One of the elders stepped forward, shaking. By the sacred laws of the Flameblood, the challenge has been met. The human has earned the right. Valaria's voice cut him off. He is unworthy. Her voice echoed like thunder. The sky seemed to darken as her anger flared. I will not marry a human. They are weak, they smell like metal and dirt, they know nothing of honor. But the elder replied slowly with fear in his voice. Princess, the law is clear. You cannot take back the arrow. You gave the challenge. He answered it. Valaria turned to the human. She stormed down from the platform and stood in front of him. He was taller than she expected. His hands had scars, his eyes had seen pain. What is your name? She demanded. Darren, he said quietly. She sneered. Do you even know what this means? I do, he said. Your law says you must marry me. She laughed bitterly. I would rather die. But Darren didn't move. Then I won't force you. What? You fired the arrow? I caught it. I did my part. I will honor your tradition. But if you refuse, I'll walk away. He turned slowly. And something strange happened. Valaria's heart, trained for war, never for love, shivered. For just a moment, the crowd gasped. Was she really going to let him walk away? Break the sacred law? Lose the honor of her clan? Stop, she called. Darren paused. She stared at him, her fists clenched. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Fine. If you want to claim me, you must survive the burning sands alone. If you live, we talk again. If you die, then we're done. Darren looked up at the towering fire desert shown in the distance beyond the city walls. The burning sands had taken hundreds of lives, aliens far stronger than humans. Still, he nodded. I accept. And he walked toward the desert without another word. The crowd murmured, stunned. Valaria watched him go, her face cold. But deep, inside, her chest ached with something new, something dangerous. Curiosity. Because no human should have caught that arrow. No human should have been so calm. And yet, He had done both. She whispered to herself, "Who are you, Darren?" And far away, in the burning sands, the winds began to howl. The next morning, the city of Vale was quiet. Too quiet. Normally, the royal towers buzzed with energy, echoing, with the stomps of warriors and the roar of war beasts. But now the sky itself seemed to hold its breath. Princess Vilaria stood alone at the balcony of her chamber, overlooking the edge of the burning sands. Far below, a thin figure walked across the fire-colored dunes. He didn't run. He didn't even look back. He just kept walking, straight into death. She clenched her jaw, her silver eyes narrow with rage. "Stupid human," she growled. "Who does he think he is?" No one had ever made her feel like this before. Angry, confused, curious. She was the flame-blood princess feared across 4 star systems. Yet now a quiet human named Darren walked through the desert just because of some ancient tradition, and it bothered her more than it should. "He doesn't want the throne," she muttered to herself. "He doesn't want power. Then what does he want?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Elder Norvac, the oldest of the royal judges. He bowed carefully. "Princess, the human has entered the second valley. He is still alive." She turned, slowly. "And, by law, if he reaches the oasis by sunset, he earns the right to speak with you again, as a suitor," Vilaria hissed. "He'll die out there. The sand creatures will strip his bones. He will be forgotten like the others." The elder hesitated. "You said the same thing yesterday, and yet here we are." Meanwhile, in the heat of the second valley, Darren stumbled but didn't fall. His body was covered in burns. Sweat poured down his face. His lips cracked. But his hands, still strong, held a single item, the sacred arrow he had caught. Every few steps, he stopped to check the sky. Not for direction. For her. He knew she was watching. Darren didn't care for thrones or power. He had lived through battles on Earth, served in forgotten colonies, saved lives while others ran. And when he saw the fire in Vilaria's eyes as she fired that arrow, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. A challenge worth facing, not just for marriage, for understanding. Back in the arena tower, Vilaria paced like a caged beast. One of her guards, a massive alien with 4 arms, spoke nervously. "My lady, the human does not stop. He faced a fire eel an hour ago. He killed it. With a rock." "A rock?" she snapped. The guard nodded. "Why does he do this?" she whispered. More to herself, that was the true reason for her rage. Not because he caught the arrow. Not because the law demanded marriage, but because she didn't understand him. Everyone she knew chased power. Everyone lied, plotted, or fought to rise. But this human had no clan, no army, no reason to face death, yet he walked willingly. She hated that mystery. She hated the strange calm in him. As sunset neared, Vilaria flew out alone on her hover chariot. She wanted to see for herself. No more messages, no more second-hand reports. She landed just before the final dunes of the third valley, and there he was. Darren stood, barely breathing, at the edge of the sacred oasis. His armor was melted in places. One leg bled. His hands shook. Yet when he saw her, he smiled. "Vilaria," he said softly, as if her name were a prayer. She didn't speak. She just stared. "You win," she finally said. "You reached the end. Now speak." Darren took a long breath. "I don't want your throne. I don't want your warships. I don't even care if you marry me." "Then why?" she demanded. "Why catch the arrow? Why suffer for a woman who hates you?" Darren stepped closer. "Because your arrow wasn't just a weapon. It was a call, and I answered." For a moment, Vilaria froze. Her heart beat loud in her ears. "You're insane," she whispered. "Maybe," he said with a weak smile. "But I don't lie." She stared at him in silence. The sun dropped lower, painting the desert gold and blood red. "Fine," she said at last. "You earned your right, but I'm not yours yet." Darren bowed slightly. "I never said you were." And in that moment, for the first time, Vylaria didn't see him as just a human. She saw him as a warrior, one she couldn't understand, and that made her want to see more. The next challenge was not written in law books. It was written in flames. Princess Vylaria sat upon the dark stone of the high seat, her eyes cold as ice, though the heat in the chamber made others sweat. Around her, clan leaders whispered. Elders shifted nervously, and in the center of the ancient hall stood the human, Darren, bruised, burned, but alive. No one had ever survived the burning sands without a shield drone or air supply. Yet Darren had walked it, alone, with nothing but grit and will. But Vylaria wasn't ready to surrender. Her pride. Not yet. She rose slowly, voice calm but sharp. "You passed the sand. Good. Now face the fire." The elders looked up in alarm. "Highness?" Elder Norvac warned softly. "There is no fire trial written in the sacred customs." She cut him off with a stare. "It's not in the old ways, but it is in our blood. If he wants to stand beside, a flame blood, he must survive fire." The hall went quiet. Vylaria pointed to the circle of blackstone before her throne. "Let the trial begin." 2 hours later, Darren stood in the center of a wide pit, surrounded by rising stone walls. Above him, hundreds watched from the balconies. Warriors, nobles, even curious off-worlders who had heard of the strange human. In the middle of the arena, vents hissed. Heat poured in from below. The trial of fire had begun. Darren wiped sweat from his forehead, his shirt already soaked. Across the pit, a large metallic gate opened, and 3 flamehounds stalked out, eyes glowing orange, their fur made of heat-reactive fibers that shimmered like lava. They growled, the crowd roared, but Darren didn't move. Up above, Vylaria watched without blinking. She'd trained with flamehounds since she was 12. Each one could tear through armor. Each one was born in the volcano pits of her homeworld. This wasn't a test of muscle. It was survival through instinct. "He'll run," her cousin whispered, beside her. "Humans run." But he didn't. As the first flamehound pounced, Darren did something strange. He rolled toward the beast. Not away. Using its own momentum, he slid under its chest and kicked upward with both feet. The beast flew sideways and hit the wall. The crowd gasped. The second hound came fast, teeth snapping. Darren dodged left, picked up a small jagged stone, and hurled it straight into the creature's eye. It yelped, staggered. By the time the third beast charged, Darren was already on its back, clinging tight like a rider, avoiding every flaming claw. Vylaria's lips parted slightly. She had expected courage, yes. But this? This was not luck. This was warrior skill, learned in real battle, not in clean training halls. Her heartbeat quickened. Back in the arena, the hounds circled Darren again, now wary. They were bleeding. He was limping. The heat was rising. A voice came over the speaker, one of the judges. "He can yield, he's earned his but Vylaria stood. "No," she shouted. "Let him finish it." Everyone went silent. Darren looked up at her, breathing hard, face flushed from heat. Then he turned and raised his hands, open and wide. He was not going to fight anymore. The crowd whispered. Was he surrendering? But something incredible happened. The injured hounds paused. They looked at him, snarled low, then, slowly. They backed away and sat. They submitted, not to fear, to respect. The crowd exploded with noise, cheers, gasps, shouts in many languages. Up above, Vylaria clenched the edge of the railing. Her stomach felt strange, like heat spreading through her chest, not from anger, from something else. She turned and walked out of the balcony without a word. That night, Darren was brought to her private garden, a place no outsider had seen before. It was peaceful, filled with glowing trees and soft music from flowing water. She waited beside a small table, wearing a black royal cloak, her crown off, her hair loose. He limped in, still bruised but walking tall. "You should be dead," she said quietly. "Maybe," he replied. "But I'm not." She studied him. "Why didn't you kill them, the hounds?" He looked up at her. "Because they weren't trying to kill me. They were protecting their home." She stared. Then for the first time her voice dropped to a whisper. "So were you, weren't you?" Darren didn't answer. He didn't need to. Valeria turned away, heart beating fast. "One more trial," she said. "The last one. Then I will decide." Darren nodded once. "Whatever it is, I'll be ready." And as he left, she placed a hand on her chest, where a fire burned that had nothing to do with tradition. The chamber was silent, lit only by the soft blue glow of memory crystals floating mid-air. The air felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. At the center stood Princess Valeria, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Across from her, still bruised from fire trials but standing tall, was Darren. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Above them, the ancient markings of the mind-bonding ritual glowed slowly to life. Lines carved by royal ancestors hundreds of years ago. This was the final trial, not of strength, not of blood, but of truth. "No lies can survive the bond," Valeria said, quietly. "No masks. If I enter your mind, I will see everything you hide, all your fears, all your secrets." "I understand," Darren replied simply. She narrowed her eyes. "And you will see mine." That part, she didn't say lightly. The Flamebloods were trained from childhood to guard their emotions, to bury pain beneath pride. Letting a stranger, a human, into her thoughts was a deeper risk than any battle. But the law demanded it. So she stepped forward, placing her hand against the ancient bondstone, and nodded. Darren mirrored her, pressing his hand beside hers. A soft hum filled the room. The memory crystals began to spin, then crackle. Then, the room vanished. In the next moment, they stood on a cold battlefield. But this was not Zarenth. This was Earth, a burning city, dark smoke rising, sirens echoing through the ruined streets. Human soldiers screamed. Darren ran through the flames, pulling a wounded child with one arm and shielding two civilians with his back. He was younger, faster, but full of sorrow. Valeria watched, stunned. This was his mind. This was his truth. Pain, duty, compassion. He'd saved lives not because of orders, but because he refused to let fear decide who lived or died. Then the scene changed. Now they were in space. A broken ship drifted in silence. Darren floated in a narrow escape pod alone for 6 days, with nothing but a photo of his sister and an old Earth song playing on loop. Lonely, tired, but still hoping. Valeria clutched her chest. His pain, it was quiet, deep, and human in a way she didn't expect. Suddenly the world flipped. Now he stood in her memories, the fire caves of Vile Rune. She was small, maybe 5. Her father, a massive warrior king, shouted at her to stop crying. "Tears are for prey," he had barked. A queen must learn to burn. She had obeyed. Every lesson was a wound. Every hug was replaced with a weapon. Darren watched as teenage Valeria stood over her first kill, her hands shaking. Not from fear, but from the silence that followed. She had expected praise. All she got was, "Next time, do it faster." Back. In the bond chamber, their bodies trembled. The stone between them pulsed. The crystals spun faster. More memories flooded through. Her rage when her mother died and no one cried. His quiet joy at learning music from an alien prisoner. Her pain when her best friend was forced to fight her. His fear of dying in space with no one to remember his name. And then, Something shifted. They both stood, not in fire or war, but in a garden. A soft breeze blew. Her secret place. But this time she wasn't alone. She had brought him here. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" she whispered in the shared dream. "Because I see you," Darren answered. The bond stone dimmed. The memory crystals froze midair. The ritual ended, but neither of them moved. They stood close now, closer than before. Not because of tradition, not because of law, because they had touched each other's truth and survived. Finally, Vylaria stepped back. Her voice was no longer cold. "You saw things no one else knows." "And still," he said softly, "I'm here." She turned, her voice quiet but sharp. "Don't mistake this for love, human." "I don't," Darren said, "but I know what it might become." Vylaria felt her chest tighten, not with fear, not with rage, with possibility. But before she could answer, a door burst open behind them. A soldier ran in, pale and breathless. "Princess, the Queen's sister has returned, and she brings war." Vylaria's calm faded. "Of course she does," she muttered. Then without turning, she spoke to Darren. "Prepare yourself. This bond may not lead to a wedding, but to a battlefield." The palace bells rang in sharp, urgent tones. 3 chimes. Only 3 chimes meant one thing. "Assassin," Vylaria's cloak billowed behind her as she rushed down the stone corridor. Her guards followed close, weapons drawn. The air felt tight like it held its breath. "Where is he?" she snapped. "In the western court, my lady," one guard shouted. "He went to the pool gardens to walk alone." "Fool," she hissed. Not at Darren. At herself, for letting her guard down, for thinking, even for a moment, that the ancient law would protect him from her enemies. She should have known better. Her clan wasn't united. There were whispers since the mind bond, rumors, that the bond had changed her, made her soft, that the outsider should die before he touched the throne. They wouldn't face her in battle. They sent an arrow instead. Darren walked slowly along the quiet edge of the garden pool. Strange glowing fish swam beneath the water, their colors shifting with the rhythm of the music trees. He breathed deeply. For the first time in years, his heart felt still, not peaceful, but still. The bond had changed something inside him too. Vylaria's fire hadn't burned him. It had lit a corner of his soul he thought long dead, and that scared him more than the burning sands. Then a sharp sound, too fast, too quiet. He turned. Thunk. The poisoned arrow didn't hit him because he had turned just in time to see it, and it sank into his shoulder instead of his chest. His legs buckled. Fire rushed through his veins. The poison was alien, thick, designed to kill fast and leave no mark. He dropped to one knee, his breath shallow. But before darkness took him, he whispered one word, "Vylaria." She found him there, face pale, hand clutching the broken arrow, blood trailing into the sacred waters. "Darren," she shouted. She didn't wait for guards, didn't care about protocol. She ran to him, dropped to her knees, and pressed her hands to his wound. "Stay with me." "Look at me." He blinked weakly, eyes struggling to focus. "You're yelling again." She laughed, but it cracked halfway into a sob. "Stupid human," she whispered. "Don't talk. Just breathe." One of the healers arrived with tools, but Vylaria stopped him. "No potions, no delay, bring the bloodroot now." The guard looked shocked. "But my lady, that ritual is only for now." They obeyed. Moments later, Vylaria sat on the ground, Darren's head in her lap, and a sharp ceremonial knife in her hand. She cut her palm, letting her royal blood drip into a sacred crystal bowl. It glowed red, then gold. Then she pressed her hand over Darren's wound. The ancient healing began. No alien has ever shared blood with a human. one elder whispered nearby. She's breaking 10 laws, said another. But she didn't care. As her blood sank into his skin, Darren's body began to seize, violently. His eyes rolled back. The poison and power fought inside him. His veins lit up faintly, gold under his skin. He cried out. She held him tighter. I didn't ask for you, she whispered. I didn't want this, but now, you're mine. After what felt like hours, Darren's breathing slowed. He opened his eyes. She gasped. They were no longer dull brown. They had streaks of gold in them. Royal gold. Blood-linked gold. He was now bonded not just by tradition but by life. Later, he woke again in her private chamber. Rain tapped gently on the crystal ceiling. The room smelled of smoke and flowers. He tried to sit up, groaning. You should rest, Vylaria said. She sat beside the bed, armor off, eyes soft but guarded. I survived, he croaked. Barely. He looked at his hand. The veins were still glowing faintly. You gave me your blood? Vylaria stood pacing slowly. You were dying, she said. And I made a choice. Darren smiled faintly. That makes 2 of us. She stopped, looked back at him. This changes everything, Darren. The council will say I'm not fit to rule, that I betrayed our laws. Do you believe that? She didn't answer right away. Then, no. For the first time, I think I'm becoming something stronger than a ruler. She looked at him. I'm becoming yours. But peace wouldn't last. In the shadows of the capital, her enemies sharpened their blades. Because the blood bond was not just a healing act, it was a claim, and war would come for it. For the first time in centuries, the High Council of Flame Blood gathered in silence. No drums, no horns. Just silence and judgment. Princess Vylaria stood in the center of the circular chamber, eyes locked forward. Behind her, Darren stood quietly, wrapped in healing cloth and still recovering. The gold veins in his arms glowed faintly. Living. Proof of the royal blood inside him. Around them, powerful warlords, matriarchs, and flame priests watched with cold, unreadable faces. Then came the voice of Councillor Draven, her mother's cousin, and now her loudest enemy. You gave your blood to a human, a lowborn, a stranger. This is not love, Vylaria. This is madness. She didn't flinch. He earned it, by law, by honor, and by surviving what no warrior ever has. You dishonor our ancestors, Draven roared, slamming his fist. You broke ancient law, you defiled the bond of flame. Murmurs rose. Some nodded, some looked away. Only a few kept their eyes on her. She raised her voice, not angry, not afraid. Solid. I did not break the bond, I made it real again. Outside the council hall, the city was splitting in 2. Some saw Vylaria as a hero, brave enough to challenge tradition for something greater. Others called her cursed, a blood traitor who had weakened the royal line. Darren saw it all from the shadows. The stares, the threats. One child pointed and whispered, That's the human who poisoned the princess. An old woman spat near his feet. He didn't reply. Instead, he stepped into the training square and picked up a spear. Alone, with slow strength, he practiced the flame blood style he'd seen Vylaria use. Strike, twist, step, again, until he bled. Until the warriors around the square stopped mocking and started watching. Back inside the palace, Vylaria's own guard captain approached her in private. My lady, the council is preparing a vote. If they decide you are unfit to rule, they will strip your title. Vylaria didn't blink. Let them try. The captain hesitated. If they do, they will name your cousin Kaelin as heir. Vylaria narrowed her eyes. Kaelin would sell this planet to the outer syndicates for a single ship of gold. The captain whispered lower. He already made promises. If he wins, he will not just exile you. He'll execute the human. Silence. Then Vylaria's voice came low and hard. Let them come. That night, Darren stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the burning torches in the lower city. Riots had broken out. Two sides shouted into the night, those for Vylaria and those for the old laws. He heard footsteps. Vylaria joined him, wearing her battle armor. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him. Then she said quietly, "They're going to vote tomorrow. I might lose everything." Darren turned to her. "Then let's leave, walk away, come with me to Earth, we'll disappear." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You don't understand. This isn't just about a crown." He stayed silent. She faced him. "They didn't just try to kill you, Darren. They tried to kill what we are, the bond, the choice. If I run now, others like me will never get to choose again." He understood then. It wasn't about ruling. It was about changing what ruling meant. He stepped close. "Then I'll fight with you. If they raise weapons, I'll raise mine. If they vote you down, I'll carry you out." She looked into his eyes. "No. If I fall, you must stay standing." "Not without you," he said. But she didn't answer. Instead, she took a ring from her finger. A symbol of her royal bloodline, blazing gold carved like fire. She placed it in his palm. "If I don't return tomorrow, give this to the rebels in the lower city. They'll follow the fire, even if it comes from human hands." Morning came. The vote was public. Thousands watched through crystal walls and sky drones as the council gathered. Vylaria stood straight, calm. The final vote passed. 6 votes for her removal. 5 against. Silence. Then Draven rose. "Vylaria Flameblood, you are stripped of title, of command, and of royal rights. You are—" The chamber shook. From above, a sky bomb exploded near the roof. Smoke poured in. Chaos erupted. The crowd screamed. And from behind the smoke, Kaelin's private army entered. Armed, masked, firing stun rounds. It was never about the vote. It was a coup. Vylaria moved like lightning, cutting down 2 attackers, with her bare hands. "Protect the elders," she shouted. And then, across the chamber, she saw Darren. He had come. He threw her the spear she had trained him with. She caught it mid-air, just like he had once caught her arrow. And the war began. The palace halls burned. Smoke twisted through the air like dark ribbons, and shouts echoed off stone walls as armored boots clashed, weapons fired, and banners of gold were torn from their poles. But Princess Vylaria didn't run. She charged. With her royal spear in hand, her eyes blazing, she cut through Kaelin's, traitor guards like a blade through silk. Her red cloak whipped behind her like fire itself. "She's unarmed," one soldier shouted. He was wrong. Vylaria was never unarmed. She was the weapon. At her side fought Darren, his wounds half healed, but his heart full. He didn't fight like a trained alien warrior. He fought like a soldier who had survived the worst the galaxy could offer. No technique, just instinct, grit, and fury. Vylaria and Darren fought back to back, alien and human, fire and steel. Together, they moved like they'd trained all their lives, but they hadn't. They had simply chosen each other. Outside, in the city streets, word spread like lightning. "The princess has been betrayed. She fights with the human. Kaelin is trying to take the throne." And then, they rose. Rebels, commoners, former soldiers, even some of Vylaria's own elite who had been ordered to stay neutral. They disobeyed. They couldn't watch history die in silence. Torches lit. Horns blew. The people surged toward the palace. In the throne room, Kaelin stood tall, sword in, hand crown already placed upon his head. He sneered as Vylaria entered. Her armor cracked, her hands bloody. "You should have stayed quiet, cousin," he growled. "The council is mine, the city is mine. Step down and I'll let the human live." Vylaria didn't blink. "I don't need your mercy," she said, her voice like steel. "And I don't want your throne. Then why are you here?" Kaelin laughed. "To die for him?" She raised her spear. "No. I'm here to finish what the arrow started. They fought. Kalen was stronger, fueled by pride and fear. He had trained with champions. He had royal steel and rage. But Vylaria had something else: purpose, every block, every strike. Every breath was not just for herself, but for all who had been told they couldn't choose who to love, who to fight beside, who to become. She ducked his final swing, rolled low, and struck. Her spear pierced his chest. He fell to his knees, shock in his eyes. "You gave it all for a human," he gasped. Vylaria stepped back. "No, I gave it all for freedom." When she emerged from the throne room, the fighting had stopped. The people had taken the palace gates. The council stood in stunned silence, watching her covered in sweat, blood, and fire. Elder Norvac stepped forward, voice trembling. "You are no longer just heir to the flame blood," he said. "You are its rebirth." Vylaria looked around, at her people, at Darren. Then she said, "The old law said I must marry the one who caught the arrow. But I say this, no law should force the heart." She turned to Darren. "I choose him, not because I must, but because he stood with me when no one else did. Today, I do not marry a human. I marry my equal." Days passed. The fires were put out. The wounds began to heal. And on the last day of the cycle, the stars aligned. The ceremony of flame. Under the twin suns, Vylaria wore a gown of fire thread, glowing with royal light. Darren wore a simple dark robe, with only one golden band, a gift from the people who had once feared him. She walked toward him slowly. He met her halfway. "I never wanted a queen," he whispered. "And I never needed a king," she replied. "But I found a partner." They stood before the people of Zarenth side by side, and when they kissed, the crowd erupted, not because of tradition, but because for the first time a flame-blood royal had chosen love over law. That night Vylaria stood alone in the royal garden watching the stars. Darren joined her quietly. She didn't turn, just smiled. "You changed me," she said. "No," he replied softly. "You just finally got to be yourself." She turned toward him. "I was born a warrior, but tonight, I became something else." "A bride?" he teased. She shook her head. "No, a legend." And above them, the stars of Zarenth blinked as if bowing to the new flame that had been lit.